you're in Chicago right now?
Yeah.
How long have you been there?
2 days.
Oh, damn. Okay. I was there last week.
Oh, really?
Connections was there.
Uh-huh.
And there's another, I didn't realize that there's another conference that was there too called Heart of Service.
Okay.
You guys have ever heard of that one? It's another kind of Salesforce offshoot of it. So anyway, and I didn't realize you lived there for that long. Chicago in the summer is primo.
That's unbeatable. Yeah.
I think I think it might be like, if not the best, like maybe like one of the very best cities in America, like in the summertime.
For 3 months out of the year. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think it's also because how awful it is. Yes, that dichotomy does something to you, I'm sure. Because my experience with Chicago, I wasn't really much of a fan. And then I think about 5 or 6 years ago, I went there for the first time in the summer and was just like, wow.
Yeah.
It's a different place.
Definitely. Did you go to a Cubs game?
I have not been to Wrigley Field yet. So that is on the bucket list. I did ride a bike.
You've kind of done summer in Chicago. You're just scratching the surface.
Okay. One of my best experiences was that first time I went. I stayed at a Kimpton. I don't know if you have stayed in any of those hotels.
I know of the brand. I haven't stayed in one.
They you can rent a bike. They give you a bike that's like part of the deal, and they're not like nice bikes. Like they're I don't liken it to like it looked like a Pee Wee Herman bike. Like it was red. Actually, it was red with like those kind of like funny handlebars. And I was like, I'm gonna take this thing out and no gears or anything. And I rode
a big basket in front of it.
Did not have I could have gotten it back.
Come on. You gotta commit.
I rode that thing around the lake with all these like serious cyclists, like just whizzing.
I love it. I love it. That's how I feel riding these like divvies or city bikes or whatever they are, where you are. Like they weigh about 60 pounds and they're just the most inefficient machines. Like it feels so silly riding them.
I do the scooters sometimes too.
Those are all right.
I enjoy them too.
Yeah, those are a good way to get around.
You can't look cool in those at all.
No. Who needs to look cool all the time?
Yeah. I'm gonna pop out to the lobby and see if anybody turns up there. I mean, I think we've got a big giant sign, but in case folks need help like navigating.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason.
We'll start at like right around 1.
Yeah.
It's funny how just a little bit of time zone change can mess you up. Like I'm sure you're dealing with that right now. Yeah, it's like 1. It was at 11 last week, and now it's at 12, and I don't know. Very minor, but still, I don't know.
I had a morning flight from Cyprus to London, which is a 2-hour difference. But that's the difference between it's lunchtime and it's only 11 a.m.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, this day just got really long.
Yeah. So Murley is one of my employees at Ascribe IT. So he's here in support. So
cool.
Happy Gatherers Day meeting.
Happy to introduce you guys.
Nice. Can you guys hear me? I keep being unsure whether or not I'm broadcasting or not.
Yeah, if you have that orange on your screen and with your name, as long as that's there, it's broadcasting. So we are all heard across the room right now.
Cool. I'm gonna head back outside. Nice to meet you.
Jay, you going to any Rockies games this summer?
We haven't made it to one in a while. The 4th of July games are always good. They put on a good fireworks show.
That's cool.
So, that's always a fun one, and the stadium's packed, which is nice. I mean, there's always a decent crowd, but for the events, it's nice to have a full house for them. But we haven't been down there in a while. We just don't get to Denver. It's not even that far away. We just don't get down that way a whole lot. It's far enough, and there were times where you could get to Denver on a weekend and be there in 20 minutes. It doesn't matter anymore. It's a 45-minute drive, even in non-work days anymore. So
For sure.
we struggle getting that. I don't know. What are your thoughts? I do like a ball game. I mean, you got the Fenway earlier.
Oh, nice.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So I'm a big Cubs fan. I had season
Yeah.
tickets for a few years, and I
Nice.
lived in the shadow of the ballpark for when I first got out of college.
Awesome.
Yeah, but I've actually never been to Coors Field, so I'd really like to go.
Yeah, it's you should. It's cool. It's a nice spot. It was in not such a great location for a while, but now everything is built up around. It's a cool spot. A lot of cool stuff around there. It was in a weird spot for a while, but yeah, Coors is nice. The ball feels good. They were playing good ball for a while, but they're on a bit of a slide right now. So it's always nice when they're winning. So yeah. Oh, baseball talk. It feels like spring. It's nice. Get a little baseball talk in.
I'm gonna go see a Phillies game when I'm in Philly next weekend.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a couple of clients. Jason left before I could invite him. So
Yeah, he took off, but no, yeah, you showed up.
to him some other way.
That's a great stadium. I'm from Philly originally, so I've been there many times.
Awesome. It's been on my list among the newer ballparks for a long time, so we're excited to go.
Yeah, South Philly in general is a great space for sports and a lot of different stuff.
There's good food too, some good authentic Italian in South Philly too.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm just starting to get to know Philly because I've had this client out there for a couple of years now, and I try to go like once a quarter. So I'm starting to get a good feel for what to do. I like it more and more every time I go.
Petco was nice when I was in SoCal. Yeah, Petco's cool. San Diego, kind of the heart of the town. Cool. It's cool. They've got the little kind of past the outfield in right field. Actually, most of the outfield. They've got this grassy area where you can just go and sit and hang out. And it's outside the park, but pretty cool. A little like park area outside the outfield. It's a cool little spot just to get.
Yeah. It looks like a pretty chill place to go.
Yeah. And to go refill my tea. It's still cool. Our mornings are still cold. So, yeah.
Hello, good afternoon, good morning. Feel free to take a seat anywhere. You'll be able to hear myself, Phil, and Jay talk across the room. We'll only be able to hear you if you get close to us. Feel free to say hi. Otherwise, feel free to take a seat and we'll get started soon. Hi, Ravi. Welcome back.
closing a few things down. Good old notifications will pop up. Right. Check those things out. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us here. We'll get started in just a few. Got my tea, Phil. You might appreciate this. My left hand mug.
Nice.
Here. Left hand, yeah. So
Hi, Roberto. Welcome. Hi, so welcome to Gather, Roberto. If this is your first time, you'll be able to hear Phil, Jay, and myself talk across the room. By default, you'll only be able to talk to somebody you're close to. If you do want to share something with the room, feel free to raise your hand and I'll give you the spotlight and you'll be able to speak as well. Or drop us a message in the chat in the lower right corner and we'll be able to pick it up. All right, I'll give it a minute or two, and then I think we're okay to get started.
I was having audio issues, so rejoin.
No worries. All right, guys. Thank you all for coming today. I think we just get started, and any latecomers can always join a little later. Thank you again, Jay, Phil, for doing this for a fourth week in a row so far. We've talked a lot about data and how that affects a CPQ implementation as opposed to other.
Kim, yeah, you were on mute.
I could have kept talking for like 15 more minutes. Thanks, guys. All right, let's try this again. Thanks everybody for joining today. Welcome back for those that have been here before. If you haven't, welcome to Gather. We try to make this a little bit more interactive and a little bit more personal. Everybody will be able to hear Phil, Jay, and myself across the room. By default, you'll only be able to speak to somebody that's in close proximity. If you do want to speak up, feel free to just raise your hand and I'll be able to give you the spotlight or drop us a message in the chat and we'll be able to pick that up as well. We are in our fourth session of this course, the fourth and the last. Jay and Phil, thanks again for doing this. So far, we talked a lot about data and how that makes your CPQ implementation really inherently more difficult than other Salesforce implementations. We talked about how a sandbox management strategy is really vital to your implementation. And last week we talked about that go live and what happens after go live, because that's something you should really think about before you go live. And today, Phil and Jay would love to keep that conversation going and really go into what happens after we're live. How are end user going to interact with this? How am I supposed to get that feedback? Because Jay, you've said this before. CPQ is a living, breathing thing. You'll never be done with it, and your end users will always find things they want to change or improve or just do it differently. So with that, I'll hand it over to you guys.
Perfect. I I will start. Yeah, Shannon, thank you. And you mentioned a word, and I'll just piggyback on your word, a little command the message for anybody out there understands that philosophy. It's you threw the word around strategy in there. I think that's been a resonating theme throughout this entire series, and will be today, as well as strategy in terms of planning, being as prepared as possible for some of these things that are going to happen in CPQ, right? Strategy, just the framework, the knowledge, the going in, what am I going to do? We talked about environment strategy, again, data management pieces, the data side, a post go live plan, which the word plan is in there. That's all about strategy. So we get to today's session, we're talking about end user engagement and what is the plan? What is the strategy? Why? What are some of the pieces that are involved in that? Really, the strategy around, all right, we've gone live. We've got this evolving creature that's living now, and its best. CPQ is at its best when it's living and changing and growing and adapting. So, how are we incorporating our users in there in terms of eliciting feedback? What do we talk about training, the big T word, right? Phil and I and Shannon as well. We got to talk about the talk today. So we were talking about some common themes and the training, the user feedback. What do we do now is kind of the question. So, yeah. Phil, you've done CPQ implementations in here. You've done. I haven't. I've never sat down and gone through a full rollout, like a piece, like from nuts to bolts, right? Whatever that term actually means, but that's the term. So you get to the end, you've rolled this out. What do we do now? Now we've got a user base that's involved. We've got a bunch of people with hands on keyboard.
Yeah, so I think when we talked last week, we talked about sort of the necessity of having a post go live plan in order to really have a successful go live, right? Yeah. And so that go live plan looks like, how do we gather user feedback? Mm-hmm. How do we prioritize that feedback? How do we determine kind of what is an enhancement request versus something that is a defect with the system, right? And at that point, the kind of recommendation is that you are either using kind of post go live support hours from your implementation firm, or you bring on a firm to kind of do the managed services aspect, right? So where my experience really comes in is I've seen a lot of go live plans, both successful and not so. So I can bring this experience to kind of to give you this transition plan. So we talked about that last week, and now we're really talking about how do we kind of make that transition to where you can take over this system without dependence on a consultancy.
Right.
So I think one of the bigger things that we have to keep in mind is how do we bring that feedback? How do we elicit it? How do we prioritize it? And also how do we start getting and identifying individuals who can own some of that within the company that's operating CPQ, right?
I think you're pointing to the fact on that last one there that it's too much for one individual. Now, I mean, there's a reason why a lot of companies bring somebody in to help them get going with CPQ. It's the same reason that one person is going to be hard pressed to manage going on with CPQ. So where can you find the users in your group that the business analyst role? I'm going to throw some roles around here, and they may not fit your exact hierarchy in your organizations, but sales operations deal desk. It's kind of an old school term, but I was at Conga for 10 years. We had that sales operations team that did that work, that deal desk work, that had the fun pleasure of making sure the quotes were correct before they could be sent out. Mm-hmm. Right. Part of CPQ is putting some guidelines, some guardrails in place. And I love salespeople. I've been in the sales organization for most of my career in Salesforce at the companies I've been at. But a lot of what we do as admins and developers is create guardrails to help salespeople protect themselves from themselves. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what we do a lot of the time here as the people. And CPQ is built to do that. How do we provide them a flexible mechanism with guardrails to generate the things that we want them to send out into the market? So how can you identify people that are maybe in sales operations or in the deal desk or just business analyst people who have a mind for pointing out things that could be better? So identifying the people that can help you run your CPQ business is a part of that. And when it comes to a piece of that, I'm going to jump into the one point down from the one you were talking about, Phil, like the listening feedback, right? How do you gather feedback from your users? That's a huge part of engagement. People feel engaged when they feel like they're being heard. So how do you plan on giving them a mechanism where they can actually feel heard, that they can see their ideas at least go into a list that somebody's caring about right here? There's a lot of platforms, a lot of products here. So I'm going to jump into my realm a little bit and talk about some of the platforms that make sense. What do you do for change management ultimately? Do you go out and buy another system? Well, probably not. Don't go out and buy another system. You just rolled out CPQ. Do you want to go and buy another heavy system like a Jira or something along those lines? Maybe. That's up to you. That's an option. But that's going to be another system to implement, another set of users to have to manage, all those other things that come along with it. Maybe it's too much. Maybe it's the right fit. I'm not going to tell you. I don't know your specific use cases. But you can get into things like maybe it's just a custom object in Salesforce. That's what we do here at Broadly, I'll be honest with you. We've got a change request object that we built out to handle these kind of small requests we put in. Is it a record type on the case object? I've heard that. Is it a Google Doc or a Google Sheet? Than that, probably not the most effective mechanism, but at least you're tracking these things. Is it a tool like Salesforce gives you an agile accelerator? That's a work management tool at Salesforce Labs. It's on the App Exchange. It's free. Work management, user management, assignments, prioritization, it's all built into that. It might be worth looking at. Again, best part about that, it's a zero cost, nice Salesforce native application. I'm a big fan of that. Maybe the standard change request object. So there's a lot of options that exist in the market. The key is picking one, making sure it's flexible for your users and the people who are going to go and do the work. So having the plan, the strategy, pointing back to that again. Just having something on paper, here's how you put a change request in. If you would think it's a bug, tag it as a bug, have somebody tasked with checking that. Is it a bug or is it an enhancement? Prioritizing, putting it in maybe a sprint or release, how long is it going to take, and then rolling that out to your users. All of that, how to roll that change out to your users is really what the last 3 sessions were kind of about. How do we do our change management piece? But that was my big maybe value add today, Phil. I know we talked about this. This is much more in your realm, this session today. But when it comes to the technology to do this kind of thing, I've got a lot of good applications that I've seen be successful for customers I've worked with in the past.
Yeah, and for me, what's really key is identifying not only a person or a team of people to manage and operate the technology of CPQ, but a person or a team of people who can distill business requirements throughout, right? So you kind of feel like when you go through implementation that we've been managing your requirements as your implementation consultancy, right? We've been telling you this is what goes in this phase, this is what goes in this phase. At a certain point, you're going to have to identify someone from the business who is familiar enough with what CPQ delivers, what the value that CPQ delivers, who can kind of take that ball and run with it. Where I see a lot of stumbling is when we anoint one person as the CPQ person, and expect them to do everything, right? Or find others in the organization to kind of task to. But ultimately, whichever tool you pick, what's really, really critical is that you have kind of both sides. You have the technology side and the business side of your CPQ operation that are different people and that are working in tandem to deliver this user feedback.
Yeah.
We talked about kind of the system evolving, right? And this is where you really realize the value of your purchase. You've made it through implementation. You've gone live, and you've kind of been shepherded over to this this self-reliant state of operation. But where CPQ really delivers its value continuously is in its flexibility to change with not only your users requests, but also with your business needs. Yeah. And this is where the sooner that you can implement and establish this team, the better your chance of success overall operating the tool will be.
Yeah, no, and you talked about kind of the user side, your business needs, and then market conditions, right? the three driving factors that you should look at and keep in mind when talking about making continuous improvement. All right, some DevOps terms, some continuous improvement into your CPQ space. The three things are going to drive it. A macroeconomic climate, like we might be in now. I've talked about it before in some other these sessions, that if you're not updating your pricing regularly, maybe you're in somewhere you're doing some pass-through pieces like that, your pricing is going to get updated to you. You're going to have to pass those updates on as well, or just general cost of business things that are happening as well. So those three kind of main drivers, and that's where CPQ's flexibility, along with its guardrails that I was talking about, that's the perfect blend of the two. Be adaptive, but also have those guardrails in place to make sure things are working the way they should. I'm kind of looking over here at our cheat sheet now. You talked about this roll-off strategy. Again, the word strategy keeps coming up. The plan keeps coming up. I know, Phil, when you're doing projects with people, that you're writing in into that, like, here's how we're going to make you self-sufficient. So talk about the importance of planning for offboarding, right? We talked about onboarding a product, but offboarding a group, and maybe also what the value could be in bringing on a bridge gap. You talk about managed services, maybe you rolled it off, maybe you bring somebody in. But even with the managed services time, the last thing you want to get stuck with is some other company managing this for you forever in perpetuity. That's not the goal here. So, I mean, talk about some of your experience in, I mean, I'm getting to that T word. I'm starting to float into that training piece now. How do you start to get into that, and how do you write that in when you're doing scoping and working with your customers?
So I think that the right approach to training when you're implementing CPQ is early and often, right? Because this thing changes so much and was designed to do so, there's not kind of a panacea for train X users for this amount of time and they're done, right? So getting people involved in the implementation phase as soon as possible is never a bad idea. But what you're going to find as you start to grow the system is that different people are going to come in, from different parts of the business that may start to impact what CPQ looks like. Marketing could really step up. Maybe initially building out a proposal or a quote wasn't super high on the list of initial priorities. Then all of a sudden, kind of a marketing person could come in. Once we start getting this in the hands of customers, realizing, again, in this example, the value that CPQ could bring to your presentation layer of your sales process,
right?
And start to fold these people in. Now you're training somebody on a part of CPQ that they could actually kind of manage and even implement unilaterally. So it's being open to the plan changing, because that really is the goal. That's a feature, not a bug, right?
Yeah.
And also just, again, we talk about, in order to go live, you have to have this plan for post go live. And I've made plans that are 3-5 years out from go live. Okay. So there will be we're going to train this group of users next, or once we get kind of this business unit in and live in CPQ, we're going to bring on this next business unit. And what does that look like? And of course, if you've retained services or kind of transferred your implementation services into more of a managed services, what's the roll-off plan there? There's no easy answer to that question, but the kind of the distilled answer is that if you want to take on managed services, then you also need to either make sure that your partner has a plan for rolling themselves off, or you need to create that plan for yourself. What's nice about managed services, and also dangerous about managed services, is that it's nebulous. It's whatever you need kind of in the moment. We can bring some consulting in, but ultimately we are there to use as you see fit. If you decide to kind of, let's say you use us for maybe like a couple of releases just to kind of get your feet under you, and then you can switch us to training, right? Let's start training people who are doing what you're doing. Show us where in the organization to find these people who can operate CPQ from the technical and the business side.
I've also seen kind of the other piece of that where you put somebody on, I guess, essentially retainer. It's not the same thing, but this idea of a bank of hours, this managed services agreement here. And I've seen some cases where, and in fact, I did some work, some just offhand side hustle work, right? We've all done it in our Salesforce career, maybe, for a previous employer of mine. And there was a number of hours there, but it felt like they weren't utilizing me as well. There was a hesitancy to really ask for my expertise right there. And that's the other side. If you're going to go into these engagements, don't be afraid to bring them in, even if it's just, I'm thinking about doing this. Again, those hours are there, or I need some help training my users, or my salespeople just aren't getting it. What can I do here? Sometimes that outside perspective, that outside voice can make a big difference for them as well. So that's the other side of the house. I've seen it work really well. I've seen it not work well, and I've seen it not work well for a couple different reasons.
Yeah.
The reliancy or the hesitancy, kind of a balance between the two.
Similar.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
Sorry, I just to jump in, I have like a kind of a different, well, I have an additional kind of perspective on managed services, which is, I talked about that, there really is, it's kind of like anti-deliverables, right? It's kind of nebulous and it's whatever you need it to be. I put deliverables on managed services engagements because I want to continue to be consultative even when we're essentially selling you a bucket of hours and you're doing what you want with it. But you're not going to get rid of me over your shoulder, kind of giving you consulting advice in how to operate your system. It's a lot more than break fix, and if that's the only way that you're thinking about it in your post go live sort of phase, you're thinking about it the wrong way. You need to be thinking more strategically.
And that's taking it back to the audience that's here, that's maybe managing CPQ or rolling it out themselves. That same perspective that Phil just brought up right there is critical to this. It's not just one thing you're going to be doing. Don't be focusing on, okay, I just need to make sure all the bugs are ironed out right now. I've been in development. You can walk down that path and you never stop trying to improve on the things that are here right now to make them perfect. That's a hard path to walk down. You got to keep the big picture in mind. Where does the business need to go? And I have a note over here from our conversation yesterday that we always have to think about why the business needs. Why do they invest in CPQ? Right? We're here. We have CPQ for a reason. That reason is to increase efficiency or whatever it may be. Like somewhere in there, there's a stake in the ground. Why did we decide to spend more money with Salesforce? Which we as admins and organizations are already spending a significant amount of money with Salesforce already. So why are we spending more? What is the goal? A lot of times we get stuck kind of in the rabbit hole of continuing to retool and refactor things if you don't have CPQ. Phil, you and I talked about this. This is what we got to kind of the end of our prep session is without a solution like CPQ that is meant to be flexible and evolving and growing here, we can get caught in this pattern of retooling, refactoring of every single build and every single business change, where CPQ brings itself into a model that's flexible yet constrained, that's giving their users tangible value. And maybe I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, Phil. Maybe the question I didn't ask you yesterday, but when we think about our end users who are using CPQ, just spitball with me a little bit. What is the benefit to them? Because I think it'll bring us a good close to the conversation. Yeah. Why does the user care?
I literally was going to jump in with something along those lines, Jay. So what a lot of people realize with the value of CPQ is the flexibility and the feasibility of actually adding in requests from your end user base. Yeah. If you're working with something, prehistoric, like an EBS configurator or something like that, right? Like you could wait years to implement small changes. Yeah. So I think that one of the biggest drivers for the user, Salesforce is more and more user focused as we go, but it didn't start out that way, and it's easy to kind of lose focus on delivering value for your end user, and that's something that CPQ does really well because it is so flexible. So it literally changes the behavior and the mentality of the people using it, because if they see something that could be that could be enhanced, or or that doesn't work quite the way that they're used to selling, we can change that for them really quickly.
Yeah.
And it changes, and it's a whole kind of behavioral change within the organization, where people get more engaged in using the system because they know that it is changeable, rather than this static thing that they have to mold their behavior to.
That's a really good point, kind of one that I forgot, that even internally here at Prodly, maybe I'll pull back the covers a little bit more than I should. So forgive me, anyone at Prodly who sees this. We have a feature request mechanism. Right? I talk about a change request or a feature request. We go in and ask our team, our development team who's working on our product, we would like to see this in the product because we're hearing from the market that happened. It often goes into a bucket, a big pile, and it kind of sits there. Whereas that will detract from end user engagement, right? That will lower my willingness to be engaged. But when somebody goes and makes a request for a CPQ change, we can deliver that in a matter of hours or days. Do it the right way. Don't go do it in production, please, but do it the right way. But we can deliver that to them, and that means they're going to go in and use the system. They're going to see their change. They're going to continue to bring you market feedback, customer feedback, your customers, about how it can be better, and you can deliver on that. I think that's one big piece about this, and it really stresses the end user engagement part. Train them on how to use the system, right? Don't forget, give them the skills they need to work with a new system for them. Don't forget that part. That training piece means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And no one here is going to forget that, but we didn't really talk about what training is because it depends. Depends upon your maturity of your sales team. Have they seen it before? How complex is your build out? How many guardrails in it? Is it very structured, or is it on the flexible side of the CPQ configuration? Don't forget that piece. Don't forget to engage them. Don't forget to find the people, the product, and the processes to offload some of the work that you now have because you've gone live. And maybe you've rolled off your implementation partner or your managed services one. There are smart people in your organization, then sometimes they're in kind of hidden places too. So those people can be a very good agent for change and actually take on some of the work sometimes too. That's a key piece of this. I know there's some general training stuff, and Phil, I think you prepped. You've got a little bit of information. You shared it with Ian, I think, who isn't here, but early on there's some really good general Salesforce training for both, I think, users and admins, right? Kind of both sides of that. Yeah. Don't discount the availability of Salesforce resources as it relates to Salesforce technology. They're really good. I found myself looking up Omni Studio the other day. I didn't know what it was. Did a search. All of a sudden, 3 hours later, I feel kind of decent about what that is. Trailhead. So that's the really the last piece for me. Just having the plan. What is your mechanism for feedback? What is your mechanism for enhancements versus hot fixes, bug fixes? What is your mechanism to engage the greater audience? And then don't forget the reason why your organization spent the money to buy CPQ. Everything you do should be going back to pointing towards that ROI. How do we get a return on this investment? I like a distill, right? I like a
I can't add to that.
How about that? Huh? So, but that's really. And if there's other questions, here's my favorite part of these is real world experience. I'm going to put a quick poll in the chat. I talked about work management platforms or feature request kind of platforms out there. Just a quick poll, hand raise or a chat if you wouldn't mind. Who's using some sort of mechanism to track internal change requests here? Okay. Well, I will make some off the cuff recommendations. I'm a proponent. I'm a big fan of Salesforce Labs Agile Accelerator. I like what it does. It may be too much for some people. Hey, Shannon's got a hand up. I also think, and if you actually go into your own org, there is a standard object called change request, which is a really good foundational piece about the information you need to let your users submit something, they're looking for. So some general advice, the last thing I usually like to give on something like this, but I like those two platforms if I'm looking to kind of enter into that realm.
Can we talk about how to log a good bug, or how to train users on how to log a good bug? I think
Sure. We could spend a couple minutes here talking about the information that needs to be obtained. Right.
I'd like to try to talk about this without it devolving into a rant.
Yeah, we could go off on this one. Get off the soapbox. Be careful on that one. Yeah.
No, I think yeah, the two keys for me, other than link to the record and sort of a description or a screenshot, is writing out in English what is the observed result, and writing out what is the expected result.
Yeah.
Right? For me, I don't really care what work management tool you use, as long as it has space for those things. I know how to, one, should I classify this as a bug or an enhancement? Two, how to prioritize this. And three, most importantly, once we prioritize it and decide to fix it, how to go fix it. What is the expectation?
Yeah, that's really good. I put a in square brackets, right? A take it or leave it thing in the chat right there. Is it repeatable? That to me is from my dev background, right? Okay, one-off things. Did it happen again? If it's repeatable, you can show me where it's going wrong, why it's wrong, and what should happen. Yeah, you know what? That's going to go to the top of the list right there. So that's a really good point. And it's kind of funny. We could spend all day. Most of the time we get something's not working quite right. Something's gone wrong. The classic, 404 error from back in the early days of the internet. Something's not right. That's no help to somebody who's going to fix something or build something.
Right.
So that's a really good point, Phil. I forgot about that side.
So. And it's universal, but I think it's really specifically important in CPQ because of all of the different, like you said, kind of all the value that it brings, right? And this could be. We also kind of have to decide: is this a kind of a business related issue, or is this a technical issue?
Right.
Did we misunderstand requirements, or did we build something that doesn't work, or did the business miscommunicate requirements, that sort of thing? So having that extra layer and mindfulness around bug reporting really helps in CPQ specifically.
Is it in our build or is it in the requirements, or both? Yeah, there's a lot of pieces that are involved there. Good points. I mean, anything else from the audience? Happy to. Again, Shannon, you can unmute and spotlight anybody. There's a chat, raise your hand, whatever you want to do. But I am wholeheartedly thankful for people coming in, listening to us, just joining us today. Hopefully there are some nuggets. I had a high school teacher who I remember to this day talked about little golden nuggets, right? If you take one gold nugget away every day, a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of information, then it was effective and it was a good use of time. So.
And Phil, Jay, thank you for already our last session of this course. Like usual, we'll stick around for a little while. Come up to us, ask us anything, raise your hand, put it in the chat, whatever you feel most comfortable with. We'll be here.
These 4 weeks flew by, Shannon. Man.
I know, I can't believe it. That's why I said last of this specific series.
That's right. Just getting started.
Sure. And Phil, making sure. I think everyone's contact information is available, right, Shannon? They've got a way to reach out to everybody. All the attendees can reach out to us. But Phil, I know that you would be more than happy to really chat with anybody about where they are right now, how they could help. If there's anything he can do, if there's anything we can do, right? I represent Prodly. Maybe we're a little more specific. We're in the release management side, data pieces. That's what Prodly does. But if there's anything we can do, or just I will talk shop all day when it comes to Salesforce. I've been around, 15 years in this ecosystem. I will talk your ear off. I'll sit there and chat with you. If there's something I can do, I will happily do that, Prodly focused or not. So.
Yeah. Just to echo that, I mean, I will go really deep if we need to. I if you got a challenging solution that you want me to take a look at, I'd be happy to do that. Really want to make sure that you get what you get the most value that you could out of this course, and if we get to have a conversation and get to know where each other are coming from, even better.
Yeah, no doubt. Kind of sad this one's coming to an end. I admit it. I really enjoyed this. This was a nice step out of the norm. Something I personally enjoyed, and again, I learned a lot. So thank you, Phil.
Yeah, absolutely. It's same here, Jay. It was really, really nice working on this with you and Shannon.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and yeah, it's kind of it's been a nice thing to